worked on the fundamentals and mastered those yet. And so that's the angle that I came up with yesterday, and that we'll certainly record and test. And then it's just how do I be different? How do I not show up with this super high energy thing? How do I not have cars in the background? How do I not have cash money involved? How do I not look like every single other person? And I think the most effective way to do that is to come across and just be completely genuine and authentic and real, and not a clown or a dancing bear, as I like to put it. Right? Hey, look at me.
Your dancing bear email is a great email. I don't think you've sent that in over a year. Like
yeah.
Is that part of your follow-up sequence, by the way?
It was for 7-figure sales presentations.
That is a great email. So one other quick question here, because you kind of started to dive in this a little bit, but I'm going to backtrack for just a second. So there's a lot of people who they're following you up to this point. You got an idea, you've been talking about it, you're figuring out some of the opportunities in the market. And then, some people have their own stories in their own head as, I don't know if this is good enough. I don't know if the market's going to like this. So would you mind just talking through the process for just a moment? When do you decide to test? So it doesn't sound like it has to be perfect when you start to test. Like, when do you start testing in the market versus just sitting on it? If that makes sense.
You just set a deadline, and like, it's got to ship. It's got to be out, because I really only work in a very linear fashion. It's just the way I work. I don't like multitasking. I like to start a project and work on that project until it's done, and I'll move on to the next. So I need to get this funnel up and done, because you and I have an event we're going to throw in April. I got to start working on my content and presentation for that. It's going to take me a couple of months to put that together. I have the idea for the mastermind group that we're talking about starting as well. I need to get that workshop content done so that I can then start on the mastermind group. So for me, it's the other items in the future that I want to work on, want to get done, but I'm not going to go there until, hey, this has to get finished and shipped before I even start on that, or nothing gets done. Right? This is the problem where you get things halfway done and then you drop them and lose interest and get distracted. Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
okay, so we start moving and you started going into this. I just wanted to recap that last part, which is, so you've started to test just a little bit, but you've talked about meeting with the Tiger 21 group, talked about writing some different headlines. We're going to run some ads. You obviously have a list. Any advice for someone who doesn't have a list or, an online following where they start testing their big idea?
The best way to do that is, again, talk to people, conversations, jump in groups, ask questions. Hey, who else is needing help with this? Who else is frustrated by this? What's your biggest challenge? You could throw up a survey and a poll through a Facebook, Instagram ad and spend $100 on it and probably get a lot of data. You don't even need to get an opt-in. You could just use lead quizzes or write message and get answers, right?
Mike, you mentioned that, in Facebook groups, just like we put a poll in here, you can go into a Facebook group and put a poll. And just to be very open, you just gave me a brilliant idea, which is there are lots of Facebook groups out there. It's disrespectful to say, hey, opt into my thing and take my survey. But if you put a poll in the group to say, hey, I'm doing some market research, I'm kind of curious how many people in this group use landing pages, use this, use that. That's actually adds additional value to the group. And that's some free market research that you can dive in right away. Just asking questions on problems. So,
well, you know what it was, Kurt? I think probably 9 months ago, I sent out a survey to my list, and I said, I think it was 5 questions, and it was: do you use split tests? Do you use exit pops? Do you use retargeting? I don't remember. Do you use UTM codes and tracking? And it was like 4 or 5 questions, and that was it. 80% of the respondents, well over 1,000 people, said no to 4 out of 5 of those things, and that's people in my audience who are fairly sophisticated internet marketing people. If my audience is not using all of those things, then there is no chance that those real businesses out there, like the giant ones and the high rises, are using those, right?
Yeah.
So that was it. And I was just like, holy smokes, I've been an idiot thinking that making the assumption that I shouldn't be talking about this stuff still.
All right. So that's the next one is, I have actually 2 back-to-back questions for you on this. How do you know when to dig in? Like, okay, I think there's a need in the market. I'm going to start writing some copy. What starts getting you really excited to where you really start shifting your focus that this is the big idea I'm going to dig into?
Yeah, that's just a feeling. It's like, I see the opportunity here. I see that there is a big gap that is not being served well here. I see an opportunity to create a world-class product or service that can really make a big difference in these people's lives. And that, to me, is what I need to get jazzed about. And is this something I'm personally passionate about working on? There's a lot of ideas that I've had that I'm just not that into, so I'm not going to pursue it, right? So it's those 2 things that really come together. It's, there's a big gap, and yeah, I'm really jazzed about that. And the interesting part here is the third piece of the puzzle is, if you are not an expert in that yet, that to me jazzes me up even more, because I wasn't that when I did magnetic sponsoring. I wasn't that when I did elevation group. I'm not necessarily that when it comes to some of these strategies that I've normally outsourced to other people, right? But now I'm going to go in super, super deep and use this as a reason to dive in deep, execute all of this stuff myself instead of outsourcing it, so I can get a really granular understanding of how it works. And that way I can really speak from a position of absolute authority, rather than, yeah, here's what Kurt and I have done, and he's, run this stuff for me, or here's who my tech guys have done, and here's what we've done. It's like, I want an intimate understanding of how it works. So for me, it's a motivator to go to a next level of depth that just increases my knowledge, my value, and my expertise around this stuff again, right? Donald Miller's stuck. He's talks about copywriting and storytelling. He doesn't know a damn thing about internet marketing. So he's capped unless he decides to really go and take a deeper dive as far as the value that he can provide his customer base and his audience. Now, I'm not going to do that forever, but I'm going to do it for 6 months. We've got a marketing thing that I'm working on or implementing this month with my buddy Blake, that I'm going to test his methodology, basically a new lead generation methodology he's using for 30 days. I'm going to implement it, and I'm going to document everything. And assuming we get really good results, then awesome. There we go. We have another opportunity there to share and to talk about and to teach.
So another question. This is kind of personal serving, and I've learned a ton about this from you over the years. So number one of the very first businesses I ever got into was real estate investing, and I would speak on stage. That's where I met Nick, and actually first heard about you. I was selling network marketing essentially from stage, from real estate. And as that market really started to crash, I'll never forget, I hired a personal coach at that time, and somebody we all 3 of us know, where essentially they're like, hey, going down with the ship is a noble thing. And I'm like, yep. And they're like, but if you're an entrepreneur, you're an idiot. And I'm like, well, but, and to step back on something else that you said is always just leading with that authenticity and just being very open. So there were some big times that I have personally worked with you. There have been other times in your career, like with your with Evergrow, where do you have this great big idea that you just explained how excited you are, you're diving into it, for you to, hey, you know what, now it's time for me to walk away? When do you make that kind of decision?
Yeah.
Sometimes you get excited about stuff and you hang on to it too long. That's kind of the question behind the question.
It's really hard. It's really hard. It's primarily for me, when do I lose my passion for that? When do I don't want to wake up and work on that anymore? So that happened with Evergrow, the hydroponic system. I put over $1 million in cash into that, and had to write off the entire thing. Right. So that for me was just becoming unsustainable. It was going to take another $3 million, another 2-3 years to finish. And that was unsustainable. So that to me was, okay, this is physically pushing me past my stress threshold and causing way too much stress in my life, way too much financial stress in my life. It's just not a good fit for my skill set. And I took too big of a bite off of what I was looking to do. And in retrospect, Evergrow would have been unbelievably successful if I could have gotten it to a point where I could have applied my personal set of genius, which was actually selling the units. So I knew with 100% certainty Evergrow would have been a smash hit once I have something to actually sell. But I never got it to that stage. And so I'm in an industry I don't know anything about. I'm getting eaten alive by my stupid tax because of what I don't know.
Yeah.
And I just couldn't get it to the point where I could step in with what I do know and really give it a rocket boost and launch it into space, which would have been simple to do. So there was a mismatch in my calculation of what it was going to take to get it to that stage, right? Another example, though, is Self-Made Man. So, another $1 million investment, $500,000 in footage and capture, $500,000 in software. We launch it by anyone's normal expectations. It would have been a success. We did like 250 grand in our first month. Yeah. For me, that was not a success. And that was not a success because the plans that I had for the platform and what I knew it was going to take cash flow wise, that was about break even, because it's like 10 grand to record every single class that we produce. And we were planning to do a class a week. So that's minimum $40,000 a month in cost, plus another $30,000 a month in tech spend, plus ad spend, plus employees, plus, right? And we couldn't get it to convert on the platform. And the mistake that we made a couple of mistakes, but we built it on a custom coded platform because we were expecting to and wanted to grow into a 1 million user business platform like Skillshare or Udemy. And that was expensive and that was a huge mistake. So I would be like, hey guys, we need to split test this customer journey because the conversion rate is not what it needs to be for this to work. And the answer would be like, okay, that'll be 3 weeks and $30,000. And normally that's something I can set up on my own in 30 minutes on the tech and the platforms we're used to, like Kartra, ClickFunnels, or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. So that once again disempowered me from using my superpower, right? I had to play this game with my hands handcuffed behind my back. And so watching out and making sure that you don't put yourself in a position where you're not allowed or you're unable to use your superpower is a huge mistake. But here's what happened. We sold those classes for $5, for $19. We split tested all kinds of different pricing, and we just really couldn't sell them because of that catalog model. Mm-hmm. So 2 months ago, we put it behind a paywall. We put it into a year-long customer journey. I went in and I recorded intros and outros for every class, and I pieced them together in a year-long storyline. And that gave more context to the lessons. It gave more value to the lessons because I was explaining, here's what we're going to learn this week. Here's why you need to learn this, and here's who you're going to learn it from. Rather, where before none of that was there, it was just the expert showing up and starting to talk, right? So, and then we raised the price from $5 a class to $97 a month for 4 classes per month. So roughly $25 a class. And now we're selling it like crazy, right? And to a list that has already seen it for 2 years at a lower price point, because there's a story and there's a very clear value proposition, and there's a very clear, here's where you're going to start and here's where you're going to have at the end by the time you're done. And so that business I could have dropped. I thought a long time about just putting those things up for free on YouTube and just using to build a social media following. Mm-hmm. And so you asked the original question, when do you know when to stop or pivot or abandon or whatever? Yeah. There's no clear answer. I just take my time around this. I thought about what I should do with all of those classes in that asset for almost a year, back and forth, talking to different people, back and forth. Yeah. And so the conclusion was this was my most valuable asset. It's a phenomenal asset for the people who watch the classes. Once they watch them, they're like, holy crap, this is the best thing I've ever seen. And I just needed to reposition the product. And so that's what we did. And maybe it would work, maybe it wouldn't. It's working so far really well. If it didn't work, well then great. I'll throw them up on social media. But I wouldn't quit too soon. I would think about what's wrong here. Why is this not working? Talk to people. I talked to a lot of my colleagues. Hey guys, why do you think this isn't working? And they gave me a lot of great advice. I implemented that advice. Now it's working. But I could have, I was this close to dropping it and just moving on completely. So
what's interesting, it's a couple of quick things that I know we're short on time is I have a couple other questions here for you, Mike.
Yep.
I'll never forget where I'm just, as a man, this is my story, as I'm just going through an interesting time in my entrepreneurial journey. I mean, just by chance, you ran into my girlfriend at a place that you love to eat here in, here in Austin. And she's like, hey, you should really talk to Kurt. And you and I went out for dinner. Had been a long time since we had dinner. And I just wasn't happy in what I was working with. And that was kind of the theme that you just talked about, with walking away or getting really excited about it. It was really kind of that emotional journey. Is how do you feel about it? And one thing that I'll never forget that you said to me is, you're like, hey, look, and I know you were just talking figuratively, but you're like, hey, look, as a man, we have 5 opportunities if we really want to take a swing at it. So it depends on how long you want to hang on to your last opportunity. And that's really what I received was, I can decide if I want to hang on for a long time. It doesn't make me happy, or just do something else. And what's interesting is I remember when I first kind of got the aha about the belt method. I don't even know what that was. It was the video views. Now that you're telling the story, I came over to your house as soon as you had that webinar, and you had made about 200 grand and you were expecting to make $1 million. And I'm like, look at this, Mike. And you're like, yeah, but it didn't happen. I was expecting to make $1 million. And I'm like, but you made 200. This is great. And it's interesting to hear you go through the different journeys where a lot of people feel that, hey, that would be a huge win on their part, but something that you would walk away. So it's always interesting where people walk away at different levels. What I heard you say is, it boils down is, how do you feel about it when you wake up in the morning, essentially, over and over and over? So
yeah. I mean, for me, the last 2 companies, Magnetic, I left because I said everything that I needed to say. And I was like, I got nothing else to teach here. I've put together 6 different courses. I have nothing else to offer. I've literally put it all on paper and video. And so when I hit that point, I tend to want to move on, because if not, I'm not happy. And if I'm not happy, I'm not going to be creative. There's nothing that's going to come from that. Yeah.
I think I have just 2 or 3 very, very quick questions. I think we pretty much covered this. What I heard you say, and just I'm repeating it back so I understand this. So
Sure.
Tell me if there's something different from this. So what I heard you say when you start doing some market research, you start asking a lot of questions. Do you go to Google? Do you pay a market research firm when you really dive into it? Or is this a lot of conversation? That's great. That's what I thought. That's exactly what I thought. So how do I know if the market's going to respond? It sounded like just by you asking questions and doing some market testing. So it doesn't sound like it's that complicated. Did I miss anything there?
I just observe. And I'm really